It's Shana Meyerson with YOGAthletica in Los Angeles, California. Today, we're going to go through some anatomy and physiology explaining internal versus external rotation of the arms and of the legs. Okay, just to get our terms straight. When we're talking about internal or external rotation of the arm, we're talking about the humerus, okay? This bone from your elbow to your shoulder turning, okay? When we're talking about internal or external rotation of the leg, we're talking about the femur, okay? The bone that goes from your knee to your hip turning, okay? So I'm not talking about shoulder movement. I'm not talking about hip movement. Yes, this is why no one invites me to go dancing with them. I'm talking about external or internal rotation of the arm, the humerus, or of the leg, the femur. Let's start with the arms. So if I'm just standing here, la-di-da, my arms are neutral. They're just sort of hanging by my side doing nothing, okay? To externally rotate, I take my humerus, wasn't that funny? And I turn it outwards. And you'll see that when I externally rotate my arm, my thumbs will actually turn out and pinkies in. So this is external rotation. As you can guess, if I were to take my humerus, not my femur, and turn it in, so my thumbs go towards my body, and my palms are facing backwards, this would be internal rotation, okay? Neutral, external, internal. Stick with me. Quiz time. Let's go into Urdhva Hastasana. As I know you know, when the arms go up, the pinkies are closer than the thumbs. So if I were to go up with my arms just neutral, and I turn my pinkies closer than my thumbs, is this internal rotation or is it external rotation? Go ahead, try it, or watch me one more time. So my arms go up neutral. I roll my pinkies in. Is that internal or is it external? If you're like 97.34% of the world, I think that's the exact figure, even though I just made it up right now, I bet you said internal. Unless, of course, you're thinking, Shana wouldn't make a video on this if it were so simple that I'm like, oh yeah, it's internal and it's gonna be internal because yeah, it's not internal, it's actually external. So how is that external? I took my arm and I very clearly took my humerus and turned it in. How is that an external rotation? Well, we measure rotation, remember, from neutral. External rotation, if I continue that and take my arms up, oh my goodness, my pinkies are lower than my are closer than my thumbs. If I take my arms in internal rotation and take them up, well, I actually can't. But from here, if I take them into internal rotation, it looks like this. The palms would turn away from each other. Crazy making. The first time somebody told me this was external rotation, I thought my mind was going to explode for weeks. And it didn't. That's the good news. Head still intact. But it took a while to figure out that we measure from neutral. That's how we determine what's external or internal. When your arms are up in the air, it's actually the opposite of neutral. I mean, find me a person whose neutral arms are like this, and I will send over the Guinness Book of World Records. So what seems like internal is actually external because your arms are facing the wrong direction. Want to test the theory? Again, I take my arms down, look at that, voila. Thumbs are out, that is an external rotation. Now, just so you know, in yoga, almost every single pose in yoga that does not involve taking your hand behind your back in a bind, is going to be arms in external. The arm comes in internal basically when your hand comes behind your back, either in a bind or, say, in a reverse namaste. So when in doubt, external, 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 external. Also, by the way, you can be external in your humerus, but internal in your radius and ulna. Meaning I turn out from the upper arm and in from the lower arm, like you would see in, say, downward facing dog or warrior two, because we have a joint at the elbow that allows the bottom of the arm to work semi-autonomously from the top of the arm. Okay, let's move on to our legs. Neutral. How do I know when my legs are neutral? My legs are neutral when the hip point and the knee, not necessarily the braid, are facing the same direction. So my hips are facing forward, my knees are facing forward. This is neutral. External rotation, legs turn out like Charlie Chaplin. My femur rotated outwards. I know you know what internal rotation will be. It will be pigeon toes. Neutral, knees and hips facing the same direction. External, hip is facing forward, knee is facing out. Internal, hip is facing forward, knee is turning in. Okay, so let's take this into half moon, Ardha Chandrasana. So when I come into a half moon position, we'll start from sort of like a standing split. So I come onto my toes. I lift up a foot. This isn't on my toes at all. I'm probably drunk, except for the fact that I never drink, but I'm drunk on something. Life. Okay, and then I turn into my half moon pose by opening my body to the side, right? And taking my arm up into the air. So I'm going to show you, once again, what happened in my leg. I started in a neutral space, right? Both hips are facing the same direction as the knees. And I took my legs and I rotated so that now my hip is on top of my knee. My hip is on top of my other hip instead of being square with it. So, that top leg, what kind of rotation is it in? Let's watch one more time. So I go from here, and I do what we call opening up my body. What kind of rotation is this top leg in? If you're like 97.42% of the world, you probably said external. I took my leg and I opened it. Yeah? The top leg, guys, is actually neutral. Neutral, you say? Yes, neutral. Because, check out the hip. It's facing the same direction as the knee. Ooh. How could that be? Clearly, this is not a neutral pose. But it's the bottom leg that actually went external. I took my femur and it rotated in the hip joint. However, because my foot is the anchor, my hip is what did the pivoting instead of my leg, so that becomes confusing. So let's watch again. When I enter, my hip and my knee are facing the same direction, yes? Okay, watch my bottom leg now instead of my top leg, which we know is neutral. I rotate my hips so that my bottom hip is now facing sideways. My knee is facing forward. That, my friends, if I come to neutral with this leg, is an external rotation. Pretty cool, huh? It's fun to play with understanding these internals and externals. So if you're newer to yoga, and particularly if you're newer to teaching, start dissecting your poses. You might be surprised sometimes. What is internal? What is external? And what's just plain neutral? I, my friends, am never neutral. I'm always crazy. Hey, be sure to check out my Venmo classes. Those are full-length classes, not just the poses that I do one by one on YouTube, but full-length classes of every level, every intensity, and every length. For those who like long-ass classes, you know I got those. And for those who like shorts, I got some of those too. This is Shana Meyerson with YOGAthletica in Los Angeles, California. Wishing you an awesome day, no matter which way it might turn.